Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the third video in the video series, the Second Civil War in America. The first video covered, it was more of like a generalization. And now what I'm doing is I'm going through each of the detail, each of the points that I covered in that general video, and I'm going into them in more detail. So the second video was about the, about freezing and starving, and the, how difficult it would be to get energy and food supplies. Okay, if you haven't seen those two videos, go check those out. So this video is about military involvement or lack of involvement. Okay, so basically it covers the military. Okay, so there's two possibilities: either the military gets involved or the military does not get involved in the factional fighting. Okay. In the case where they do not get involved, okay, and they basically say, let the factions figure this thing out on their own, that's actually a best case scenario long term, because that is going to allow the country to eventually come back together as a United States, okay. If they decide to actually get involved and support one side or the other side, the chances of the military ever coming, the chances of the country ever coming back as a United States is very unlikely. Okay, so let's talk about why. Okay, first of all, the fighting. Okay, it's not going to be like the first Civil War where it was North versus South. Okay, where you had clear divisions. Okay, I mean right now we're kind of divided with liberals in the cities, conservatives in the countryside, but that's very much a generalization. You still have conservatives living in cities. You still have liberals living in the countryside. I mean, you can go down any road, and basically the houses can alternate from conservative to liberal. Keep going back and forth. Okay, so you got these so you got liberals and conservatives living side by side throughout the country. They basically talk the same language. They pretty much look the same. So you have no way of really knowing who is who. Okay, so if the military does not get involved, they would take on the function of basically securing the borders and making sure there's no foreign influences coming in to affect the civil war. Okay, and that would be an ideal scenario. Okay. And I touched on that in the first video, and I'll probably do a more detailed video on that. So that's one case scenario. In the other scenario, the military does take sides or decide that they're going to actively, even if they don't take sides, they decide they're going to actively stop the fighting. Okay, so now in that case, basically martial law is declared, and the military is basically going house to house, doing searches, looking for rebel leaders or faction leaders. Collecting guns, that sort of thing. So as the military is now going house to house doing their searches, there's a couple of issues with this. First of all, the military overall does not function like a scalpel. Okay, they're not a razor. They're not even a hammer. Okay, they're basically a bag of sledgehammers. Okay, they use very heavy-handed tactics. And that's how they're trained, and that's what they use because that's what's effective in combat. Okay, when you're being attacked by other armies, that's how you have to fight it. So that's where the military is, how the military is trained to fight. Now sometimes they do scale it back in isolated instances, but that's not something that they can do long term. Okay, long term they're going to fall back into what they really do: use very heavy-handed tactics. All right. So now we have a situation where they're going house to house, they're doing these searches. Okay. Now let's flip this around for a second, right? Let's talk about the people that are inside those houses. Okay. And now all of a sudden their house is being broken into. Okay. From their perspective, they don't know what's going on because while the Civil War is in play. You have food shortages, you have energy shortages. So now you have lots of home invasions. You have groups of people, doing invading other people's properties and homes, looking for supplies, looking for resources, okay? And in typical fashion, at that point, they're going to be entering the homes, killing the people to steal their food, okay? That's the nature of civil war. Things get really desperate, especially if they're starving, okay? So the people on the inside of the house, they don't know if they're getting robbed by raiders, okay? They don't know if even if they recognize that this is some type of a military unit, they don't know if it's a military unit of one of the factions, okay? It might, regardless of whether it's a faction that they support or a faction that they're against, they're not going to like the idea of either faction coming in and taking their food, okay? Because basically once all their food is taken, they're going to starve because they're not going to be able to resupply themselves, okay? In that case, again, the people inside the home need to defend themselves. They're pretty much got their backs against the wall, okay? And in the case, again, if it's the formal military, the official military, if they're coming in, one of the things to keep in mind is that everybody looks the same. Everybody's going to be wearing camouflage. I mean, I'm wearing camouflage right now. I mean, everybody's got camouflage. Everybody's got military-style rifles, right? Everybody's got AR-15s. Everybody's got tactical vests. So whether you're a part of a raiding party, or whether the group coming in is part of a raiding party, or whether they're part of one of the factions, or whether they're part of the actual military, they're all going to look the same. They're all going to talk the same language. They're all going to try and sound official because remember the different factions, right? Whether you have just 2 factions or 10 factions out there that are fighting each other. The factions are all going to have U.S. flags on their shoulder. They're going to take the position that we are, the ones protecting the Constitution. So every side of every faction is going to have an American flag on their shoulder, and they're going to be, they're going to say that they are that they are God's chosen army. Okay, so you on the inside of the house have no idea who's coming in, and you're going to have to defend yourself. And basically, if this happen to be official military units as they're coming in, first of all, they're probably going to throw a flashbang grenade, which at this point is going to also be available to factions as well. So they're throwing in some type of explosives. They're coming in. If you're inside, if you have the ability to shoot back, you're probably going to shoot back. And any way you cut this, it's going to get very ugly. Okay, you're going to have lots of civilians getting killed, and you're going to have members of the military getting killed as well. Okay. So that's kind of inevitable. I mean, you can't stop that. If the military gets involved with doing house-to-house searches in a civil war type of situation, that's how that's going to end up. And it's all going to be all house-to-house, small arms. The tanks, the airplanes, the missiles play no role at this point. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is from the military side, okay, as they're coming in, as you start seeing, as they start seeing more and more civilians and children getting killed in these actions, they're going to also split up. Okay, some of them are going to take the position that this is what we have to do in order to bring peace. Okay, and they're going and some of them are going to be like, no, this is insane. We're killing our own people. We have to stop this. Okay. So, like all civil wars, right, the military is going to split up and take sides, okay? And if you look at like the Roman Civil War, that's what armies do. So, now where you have a situation where the original military is splitting up and taking sides, and now they're fighting each other, okay? Now this is where the big weapons come into play. Now they're using tanks, they're using airplanes, they're using missiles, they're dropping bombs over areas. Okay, and now your civilian casualty rates, go up, 100-fold. Okay, so that's where the big guns come into play, and the military is going to use them against itself. Okay, and what's going to happen is as the military is fighting each other, naturally they're going to knock out the factories even faster, especially the factories that create the weapons, create the food, create all that stuff, because they're trying to weaken, one side is trying to weaken the other side by knocking out its supply lines and its supply sources. Okay, so now what's going to happen is the military is going to look outside. So now they're going to look to the Chinese, to the Russians, to the Europeans for supplies. Okay, so it's inevitable that the rest of the world is eventually going to come in and start supporting either one side or both sides. Okay, I mean, I can definitely see be it Chinese, Russians, or Europeans, aiding and supplying, both sides for the purpose of keeping them fighting. Because what the rest of the world would like more than anything, they don't want the United States to ever become a superpower again. Okay, so if they can keep it fighting against itself, they're going to do that. They'll do it by supplying both sides. Okay, so that is the road where a civil war would take us. Okay, and that's the role that the military would have in that. The only way for them to avoid this is to really take the high road. And take the position, listen, I don't care what the president ordered, I don't care what the government ordered. We, the military, are keeping out of this. We're staying at the borders. We're just going to make sure that no external armies or no external supplies come into the country. Okay, so that's the best case scenario, and that's a scenario that would actually allow the country down the road to actually come together. That's the only possibility of us ever recovering and becoming a United States again. Okay, one of the things to keep in mind is that we have a military that is very technology dependent, and those technologies break down really fast. Okay, a military that is highly dependent on technology is dependent on a smooth running economy, okay? Because not only do you have to make all those electronic units, but you have to get them from one side of the country to the other, and then you have specialists that work with those electronic units that, they have to move from one side of the country to the other. And all that would be greatly interrupted in a civil war type of situation, okay? A lot of times people look at the situation, we'll look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan, okay? Aside from the fact that the house-to-house fighting was pretty brutal, okay, in those situations, the military had a place to really, they had the ability to get out of the war zone, okay. They would not have that ability in a civil war situation that happened in America. They don't have the ability to get out of the war situation. There's no base that they can retreat to where basically the war is on the other side of the planet, okay. So it is a continuous thing, and that makes a real big difference. And this is pretty much all our wars, really, since the Civil War. I mean, even if you look at World War I, World War II, we fought those wars overseas. The factories, the supply lines, the civilian population, they were all safe back home. Okay. That would be completely different in a second Civil War type of situation. Okay, so there are my thoughts on that. If you guys got any questions, comments, more feedback from me, please post. I'll look forward to talking to you guys again soon.